Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So today we're taking a look at a few different cards. For some of them, they are trending because of YCS Minnesota, which happens to be the first event with the new cards from Darkwing Blast being legal. There were some game-changing cards released in that set that people have definitely taken notice of, as well as other cards that are trending because they happened to outperform expectations at the event. And of course, we have Magnificent Mavens coming out in just a couple of weeks, so lots of players looking for cards to take advantage of with the new Ishizu stuff. Either way, there is a lot of stuff currently being hyped, as well as things that are going to continue to receive attention over the next couple of weeks, so let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so kicking things off, I think we have to first take a look at Kashtira Fenrir. This is a new monster that just came out in Darkwing Blast, probably the most hyped card to come out of the entire set. It is widely regarded as the new and improved Pankratops, being a monster that you can special summon from your hand for free if you control no monsters. It has a 2400 attack point body, and it can let you banish your opponent's cards face down, as well as search for another copy of itself on summon. Some really useful effects that you can basically threaten your opponent with every single turn. So at pre-release, we were looking at this card being around $25 to $35, which we all knew was definitely too low, and the card certainly took off right on the set's official release. The card is only an ultra rare, but I think it's the second most expensive card in the set, right after the Bastille Magnamut, if we're not counting the Starlight rares, obviously. Now, over the weekend, the card was up between $60 and $65, which is obviously an insane price for an ultra rare that I think we haven't seen since Borreload's Savage Dragon. Of course, the card is that good, and it has certainly earned its price tag, but it's important to keep in mind that this was just the first weekend of the set being released, and that we should expect more quantities of the card to flood onto the market over the next few weeks. The card has already come back down a little bit to around $55 to $60, and I am expecting it to fall a little bit further to around $50. If you don't need the card for a regionals or a YCS or some big event like that, it just might be a smart idea for you to hold off on picking up your copies right away to see how the price behaves over the next couple of weeks and potentially get it at a bit more of a discount. The next card we have is Bastille Magnamut, one of the Bastille monsters from Darkwing Blast. This card is kind of like a DD Crow that puts a body onto your side of the field, where you can banish a light or dark monster from either graveyard to special summon it, but that effect becomes a quick effect if your opponent controls a monster. Also, if you do special summon this card, you get to search for any dragon monster from your deck or graveyard except for itself and add it to your hand during the end phase, which is really awesome. So against a deck like Tearlament or Branded, this can function as a crow that replaces itself with another Bastille monster so that you can interrupt your opponent during the following turn. The Bastille cards saw a lot of play over the weekend. They were teched into a lot of different decks as a hand trap that also stuck around and provided link material, and they were also a big part of why we saw Thunder Dragons in the top 64 of a YCS once again. This card is definitely on everyone's radar and is actually one of the most expensive super rares that we've seen in a very long time. It's currently at $10 to $11, and I don't think we've seen any super rares from a core set get this crazy since Twin Twisters was released back in Breakers of Shadow, which should really tell you something about what people think of this card. Again, we do need to take this with a grain of salt since the set is basically brand new and there's still a lot of copies that need to be released and listed onto the market, but this is definitely a card for you guys to keep an eye on because it does become arguably even more useful once the Ishizu cards come out in Magnificent Mavens. Next, we'll talk about one that probably shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. It is Gaga Cowboy. So this is a card that has actually been on people's radar for a while. Cowboy is a generic rank 4 monster that, if summoned in defense mode, lets you detach a material to burn your opponent for 800 damage, which is perfect for potentially winning the game in time. The card is always available because it's an extra deck option, which means you don't have to mill it or send it from your deck to the graveyard or worry about opening it. And this is a card that has been consistently used by Tearlaments, sometimes in the side and sometimes in the extra deck, since the deck is able to make rank 4s fairly easily with Rhino Heart and Mud Dragon. There's not really much to say about this card other than that it will be even easier to go into once the Ishizu cards come out in Magnificent Mavens, so expect to be cheesed by this card all the time. What's worth noting, however, is that the card hasn't been reprinted since back in 2016 when it came out as a gold rare, and so it has been more than 6 years since the card was last printed. Because of this, we are starting to see all versions, even the lower rarity printings, start to creep up across the board. The ultimate rares are obviously the most expensive at around $100 a piece, but the rare, gold rare, supers, and shatterfoil are all between $2 and $5 depending on the rarity. There is no longer like a 25-cent version of the card. I think that if you're wanting to play tier limits, you probably already own this card, right? But it's still worth noting this card anyways, so that you can dig it up out of your bulk if you have any extra copies and offload it before it gets another reprint. On to the next one, we have Naturia Sunflower. I know it's kind of weird to be talking about a Naturia monster other than Rosewhip, Beast, Barkion, Exterio, or Bamboo Shoot, but hey, we actually got some cool Naturia support in Darkwing Blast. On top of that, the Naturia cards mix really well with the new Ishizu cards from Magnificent Mavens, as you can mill the Naturia cards and proc the effect of Naturia Sacred Tree to search for a Naturia card. Naturia Sunflower is apparently one of the better Naturia cards to search for, since it lets you negate an opponent's activated monster effect by tributing this card and another Naturia monster from your side of the field. Not the most game-breaking effect by any means, but it is one of the better Naturia monsters out there. However, we've actually seen this card get bought out and shoot way up in price for those DT printings. The original dual terminal printings from DT03 are now $25 lowest on TCG Player, which is obviously ridiculous. Please don't pay that price. And then we also have the common DT printings from Hidden Arsenal Chapter 1 that are about $6, which is honestly still too much for a card like this. Fortunately, the supers and the common printing are still relatively cheap, so if you want to be able to play a Naturia deck for fun, it should still be reasonably affordable, especially since Sacred Tree is getting a reprint in OTS Tournament Pack 20. Not only would I consider grabbing a cheap copy now, just in case you randomly decide to start playing Naturia, but I'd also make sure that you dump any of your DT foil copies as soon as possible, because the deck probably won't be meta, and this card isn't really going to be viable in any other scenario or deck. The next card here is one that we have talked about a few times on Market Watch before. It is Chaos Emperor, the Dragon of Armageddon. So as we all know, Dragon Link took a couple of really big hits on the last ban list, losing access to both Halki Fibrax and Chaos Ruler. However, the Bastilles were supposed to be a big help for the deck, allowing them to search for dragons while also being able to put dragons onto the board for free really easily to use as link material. Because of this, Chaos Emperor is being looked at as a tech card for the deck once again. It has a pendulum effect that allows you to target a banished dragon monster and add it back to your hand, so that could be whatever you have banished with your Bastille monster. It doesn't have a very relevant monster effect, but the scale effect is great, especially since you can search for this card using either Magnamut or Melody of Awakening Dragon. Of course, Chaos Emperor is a card that constantly fluctuates in price. With only one printing that's accessible to most players, its price is extremely volatile. At this time last year, the card was down around 40 to 45, then it spiked up to 65 to 70, then it fell under $40 a few months ago, and now the card is back up once again to around $70 to $75 on TCG Player, which is honestly a bit crazy. Honestly, at this point, where this card's price is going to go is anybody's guess. There's no clear place for this card to be reprinted, so it really is up to you guys, and if you want to own the card in order to be able to play it or not. Realistically though, looking at its price history, it's probably not a bad idea to sell the card now while it's up, and then buy it back in a couple of months when it probably dips back down to around 40. Alright, I know it's kind of weird, we're actually taking a look at another pendulum monster today, Purple Poison Magician. This is a pretty simple level 4 pendulum monster. It's a scale 1, which means it's a great low scale, especially since it doesn't place any restrictions on your pendulum summon. Also, when it's destroyed, you get to pop a face-up card on the field. This card has a couple of applications in the Draco Slayer deck, which had some cool cards come out in Darkwing Blast. Now you can pop this card with Ignister Prominence to get a pop on an opponent's face-up card on the field as well, and this is also a great target to summon directly out of the deck if you pendulum summon Harmonizing Magician, since it helps to set up a level 8 synchro or a rank 4 play. The Draco Slayers with the new support haven't done too much in terms of like competitive play yet, but I do believe they're getting a lot of attention from a couple of pro players and a lot of the online community. And of course, it has been a while since we've had a good pendulum deck in the format at all, and a lot of people are excited to try this stuff out. Purple Poison was targeted, I believe, just because it's one of like those ideal buyout targets. It's only received the one printing from Pendulum Evolution. At one point yesterday, this card was moving at like $10 to $12, which was already pretty high. The card has already cooled back down to about the $6 mark. Honestly, this card is probably a bit overdue for a reprint, but the card also wasn't exactly difficult to pull, and there should still be a lot of copies of this card available on the market. If you do have any extras, now is definitely the time to list them because of the hype that the card is getting. And finally, guys, there's one last card for us to take a look at. It is Book of Eclipse. Now, this is a card that's starting to see play in people's side decks over in the OCG as a way to deal with the Kashtira deck. It's used to flip Shangri-Ira and Arise Heart face down, shutting off their effects, and since this is a quick play spell, you can even use it during your own draw phase or standby phase to stop your opponent's Shangri-Ira from special summoning a Kashtira directly from the deck. The card doesn't target, but it does have the downside of letting your opponent draw cards potentially afterwards if you can't get rid of all your opponent's monsters on the field. The good thing is that with Book of Eclipse though, there are still a lot of different printings. The card has a few common printings that you can grab for like a quarter. There's even the Dual Devastator Ultra Rare that should only be 50 cents or so. However, the version that's worth noting is the super rare version from one of the Astral Packs, and that is of course the highest rarity version of the card, or the hardest to find, and so it is the version that players have decided to target to try to buy out. Because of this, the card has gone from under $1 to now being $5 for a near mint copy on TCG Player within the last week, which is still a very noticeable price jump. If I were you guys, I would just make note of the lower rarity copies and offload the supers if you can find someone that's willing to pay up for the rarity bump. Expect the card to see fluctuating amounts of demand over the next few months until the next wave of Kashtira support comes in Photon Hypernova. Alright guys, that is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for checking it out. Darkwing Blast is actually proving to be a very influential set, both in terms of the meta as well as the market for cards and their prices. There's so many different interesting little pieces or ways for the things to interact with the new cards, and of course that causes a ripple effect that causes other cards to fluctuate in demand as well. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch, please do make sure that you let me know by slamming that thumbs up button for me. Also, make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you guys think about the cards that we talked about today, as well as what other cards are trending on the market so I can cover them in a future Market Watch episode as well. Also, if you haven't already, do make sure that you hit that subscribe button to get all of the latest and greatest content from both Tombox and myself. And until next time, guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.